Welcome to episode 12 of the Civil War Breakfast Club. I am your co-host, Mary, and I am joined by my awesome co-host, Darren Weeks.
Who's that guy? Hey, Mary, how are you?
Hey.
Like looking around here to see what the hell you're talking about. Awesome co-host. Wow, flattery will get you everywhere.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me.
So what's new? How was the last couple of days? Haven't talked to you in, I don't know, 2 minutes. So what's been going on since then?
Well, I had a really great weekend. I thought we had a really great live with Jen, our first guest. Jay Price was our first guest.
We did. It was nice for her to stop by, and she hung out for the whole time. We were talking about ghosts and other supernatural events back from the Civil War stories, which was very timely because you know why? It was Halloween when we actually did it.
Yep, and before that we had our episode about drinking with Civil War generals.
We did, and tonight we're going to be going back into the battlefield. But going back to that episode last time, did you have a good Halloween? What did you do on Halloween? Did you egg any cars, toilet paper?
No, I had a pretty low-key Halloween because there's a pandemic going on.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
I stayed inside and I ate pizza and watched music videos. That was my exciting Saturday night.
Oh, that was pretty cool. What did I do on Saturday night? Nothing. I did nothing. It was fine. You know what? It was actually fine. We didn't have any trick-or-treaters this year. None, which is fine. But more candy for me. Peanut butter cups. That's why you always get the good candy, and you keep the candy because you don't get the shit like the Almond Joy or any of that because you want the stuff that no one comes you're going to be able to eat. Kit Kat bars, peanut butter cups, Snicker bars. Remember the old whatchamacallit bars? Remember those?
Yeah. Although those I discovered when I was in the United States because we don't have them here in Canada. So
you guys can't spell whatchamacallit. That's why.
I probably can't say whatchamacallit.
You can say that.
I just did.
Oh, look at that.
I can't say Henry Heath. There, I just said it.
Oh. We had a fun time with that. So you want to talk about Heth and Meager and Kearney anymore?
No, I don't. If people would like to see me bastardizing Civil War names, please tune into our Facebook Lives because I am guaranteed to fucking do that.
You took it so well, though.
Actually, before we go any further, I do want to just say thank you again to Jen for joining us for the episode.
She was our first ever guest. She will always be in history as known as the first guest we ever had on the Breakfast Club, and she was awesome at it, and she will definitely be back on to talk about some different things, but she did very, very well, and I thought it was a good podcast. And got some good plans, got some good fun for tonight, I think, but I guess before we get started, we have to talk about our libations.
We do.
Which is going to be kind of a hint at what we're going to talk about. Just so you know what we're going to be talking about, tonight we're going to get some balls on us. We're going to talk about the Battle of Balls Bluff. We'll see how much balls you got, as they say. So
I wonder if E.P. Alexander's involved in this battle.
I hope he is. Because
he's not.
He bounces them pretty well. Actually, I don't think he is.
He's not.
We're not going to have a bushrod sighting. We're not going to have a
no.
No, this is going to have to. We'll have to behave ourselves tonight. There's going to be no trip to the old
bang
barn tonight. You know, that'll be retired for the night. None of that. This is early in the war. We'll be talking about the Battle of Balls Bluff, which occurred on October 21st, 1861 A.D. in Loudoun County, Virginia. We're going to talk about that. But I guess before we get into the details of this very underrated battle, Mary, let's talk about what we're going to be drinking, right?
Yes.
Canadians first.
All right. I am drinking totally appropriate Balls Falls Session IPA by Bench Brewing Company.
That sounds pretty solid.
And it's in my Abraham Lincoln mug, who is arguably the best president the United States has ever had.
I think I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. I am drinking Baby Seal Pool Party, and it is by Shireen Brewery, and I'm drinking it because it's got a beach ball on it. It's the closest I can do to finding a beer with balls. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's what I got. So that's what I'll be drinking. And likewise, I'm also drinking it out of my Abraham Lincoln coffee mug.
Nice.
Because we are the Breakfast Club, and we got to drink about coffee mugs. So anyway, Mary, you ever see the Ken Burns documentary?
Yes.
Probably about 1,000 times.
Yep.
Remember at the beginning, they say, the Civil War was fought in 10,000 places.
Yep.
They talk about that. We're going to talk about one of those places tonight. That
obviously.
Is not... We'll just edit that wise-ass comment out. But my point was, it's not Gettysburg or Antietam or Vicksburg or all the popular ones, all the greatest hits album stuff. We're talking B-sides now. We're going to talk about, see what I did, B-sides, Balls Bluff.
Nice. Yeah.
It's okay. You don't pay attention. You'll get that when you watch this on replay. Oh my God, that's what you meant.
No, I knew it was what you meant. It's kind of like whatever the B-side was to Let It Be was like shitty song.
It was Let It Be side.
Oh my God. No.
Oh, you're in a great mood tonight. Anyway, so we're gonna talk about. Are you done?
Yes.
We're gonna talk about the Battle of Balls Bluff, and the reason why I was going with the whole 10,000 battles to a point is that it's a very obscure one, but it's a very important one. It's one at the beginning of the war. It's one that the both armies still didn't really know what they were getting themselves into. There was some names that we probably haven't heard of before that we'll talk about. We're not talking about Longstreet and Lee and Meade and all the big guys. We're kind of getting down to the weeds a little bit, literally and figuratively.
Well, it's an important battle, I think, not just, the amount of casualties for the Union compared to the Confederates, but just the fact, like, first of all, that it was never supposed to be a battle. It never should have happened. It's what it would fall under the clusterfuck category. But the other reason that this battle is important is it is so political. And it just shows how tied together politics and the war truly are, because the end result is something that will keep going until the end of the Civil War. And it's the reason why Civil War generals become very fearful of sometimes executing their orders or maybe not doing certain things.
This battle is almost like the AP Hill trip to New York City of battles. It stuck with you for a long time afterwards.
It is.
All the way through, if you know what I mean. And it has the ramifications you talked about. I mean, it seems like a relatively small battle, but it's a significant one to your point. You got to set the stage a little bit about how what was going on at the time. This is October 21st, 1861, Loudoun County, Virginia. If you know the area, it is right along the Potomac heading north. So you pass Georgetown University, you pass Langley where the CIA building is. It's right in that area, right on the river there. So we're talking about going back to McClellan. He has just taken over the army after Bull Run, and he's in his continual phase of wanting to build the army, wants to defend Washington. So what he's doing is he kind of spreads the army out along the Potomac, up north and south, give them some room, spread them out a little bit, and train them. The Rebs by Joseph Johnston are on the other side of the Potomac. They're on just the other side of the river. And they're all just kind of sitting there. It's getting late in the year. Maybe they're thinking about maybe going into winter's quarters a little bit. No one's thinking there's going to be a battle. This is just going to be hanging out. And it kind of goes from there. There's a town not far from Balls Bluff, which is what we're going to be talking about, called Leesburg, which is a town in Virginia. And it's problematic for the North, for McClellan, for a couple of different reasons. It's got a lot of fords, a lot of places to cross the river. So the Rebs, if they've positioned themselves in the Leesburg area, it's a relatively short jumping point to get over the Potomac into Maryland and work their way back down towards Washington. So it's an area that McClellan wants to make sure he has people up in that area defending them. Johnston, to be honest, he isn't really planning on doing a hell of a lot. It doesn't seem like he was anyway.
No,
he has his army
passive at this point, I find.
He has his army spread out. They're coming off the big victory over there at Bull Run. And he just wants to basically kind of spread them out a little bit themselves and kind of sit there and catch their breath and chill a little bit. Outside of Leesburg, he has a guy named Nathan Shanks Evans, a great name. Gets his name Shanks because he has some sort of leg issue.
Yeah, he's got knock-kneed legs, apparently.
And they called him Shanks. Think how mean these people are back then.
I know.
If you had any abnormality, you got a nickname.
Oh, yeah. That was his name at West Point, apparently, is where he got it from. And he was quite the character from the research I did about him too.
You know what he liked to do, Mary? He liked to do a lot of things you like to do.
Drink.
Namely what? Namely drink.
Yeah, apparently at First Bull Run, there was an aide following him around with whiskey. This guy was hardcore. But the thing is, though, is he actually had talent.
He did. I don't want to say he was a hero at Bull Run, but he was able to maintain that flank, and he held off the Union forces long enough for our boy Beauregard. He's going to be around tonight.
Yep.
And Johnson to help shift the army around to focus a little bit to kind of keep them off. So I guess that qualifies as a quasi-hero. But he had a name for himself. He's a South Carolinian guy, West Point class of 1848. To your point, he's a big drinker.
Yep.
He's basically running a brigade up outside of Leesburg. It's got about 3,000 guys, primarily Mississippians, 13th, 17th, 18th Mississippi, and he's got the 8th Virginia with him. And he's got some cavalry. And their job basically is to hang around outside of Leesburg and just kind of chill a little bit and just kind of be there to extend the line. They're up there, and I have to think they're just thinking they're sitting on a campfire, probably just drinking some of that stuff we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. And just kind of hanging out.
Sounds like he was he was Southern, and he was obviously a whiskey guy. Mm-hmm. So that's what they said he was drinking at First Manassas.
Yeah, there are a lot of whiskey people. We talked about that. He's got a little weird feeling about him because he's sitting here and everyone's thinking, nothing's going to happen. He's looking across the river And he starts to notice that there's some Union forces on the other side that are kind of building. And it goes back to what Mac was concerned about, George McClellan, that he was concerned primarily about those riverbeds, those river passes. So he's going to move some of the Union people up a little bit towards that area. Evans is going to see it, and he's going to get a little bit nervous about it. And once he starts to see these Union forces on their side, he's noticing there's a skirmish heading towards Harper's Ferry, and there's a little things going on that are starting to concern him a little bit. So he does what anybody would do apparently in that situation, is he rolls them up and takes off and leaves.
Yep,
right?
Except he doesn't tell Beauregard about it.
Doesn't.
And he's not happy about it.
He's going to get the hell out of Dodge. He's going to try to take off. He's just going to go. And so it kind of sets in motion this whole clusterfuck thing you talked about what this was. So he's trying to figure out exactly. The Union Army doesn't know what the hell's going on. McClellan, again, he's the numbers thing. He isn't sure how many people they have over there, and he doesn't know idea. He counts and multiplies by 5 and goes from there, apparently, So he ends up basically sending one of his guys up there, a guy named Charles Stone, right? Charles Stone, we'll talk a lot about him tonight. Charles Stone, he's a guy who, he's going to send Charles Stone up to that area. Charles Stone, he's a West Point graduate, class of 45.
From Greenfield, Massachusetts.
Greenfield, Massachusetts. Look at you doing your homework. I bet you don't know where that is in Massachusetts.
It's close to the Vermont border.
Oh, you suck. I told you that.
Exactly.
I hate when you pay attention. Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Okay, but here's something I bet you don't know.
Okay.
There is a pub in Greenfield that's called the People's Pint Pub, which is really, really good. And I bet you didn't know that. So that's by the way.
Well, no, I've never been there before. But another thing to note about Stone is that a lot of New England during the Civil War, it was more abolitionist than I think most areas of the country. You have people like Robert Gould Shaw from there. Francis Channing Barlow is a known abolitionist. But Stone is not that way. He's very much like McClellan. He's a Democrat, so he's got same political views as McClellan. Stone's got a pretty cool career. He's in the Mexican War, and then he goes to Europe to study military in France, Prussia, and Sweden, which is something that McClellan did as well. In 1856, like many in the Union Army, he leaves. He's a banker, a gold broker, mineral survey of Mexican state of Sonora.
My old job.
Really? Mineralogist? Whatever the fuck it's called.
Hi, how are you? I'm your local mineralogist.
I'm Darren Weeks, your local mineral.
Hi, Darren Weeks, mineralogist.
1860, he's asked by General Scott to return to the army to organize the DC militia. So he organizes 30 companies of militia, and he oversees the security arrangements for Lincoln's inaugural journey. It seems like he's building on what could be a very good career here. He's definitely got experience. He's going to be the one commanding the Union troops out of this battle.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a guy, to your point, not a big abolitionist guy. I mean, he's running basically a couple of, 2 Massachusetts regiments, the 15th and the 20th, that we'll talk about. He's also in charge of the 42nd New York, as well as the 1st California. We'll talk about those guys a little bit later. Not first, that was Baker. We'll get to him in a few minutes.
Yep.
He's got one of these weird jobs. He's in the Corps of Observation, they call it. So you think of these Corps commanders, he's basically the guys who go out and look and just see what the scoop is. So he basically has about 6,500 guys, and they're going to go out and they're to monitor the rebel positions and movements. They don't have Google Earth there, so they can't tell.
Cell phone signal sucked.
The cell phone signal. You've been to Langley, Virginia. It sucks. That whole area, you can't get it.
Because the CIA building's there.
Oh, spooky shit going on there. Yeah. So he's going to find out what the scoop is. So his entire group is just a little bit north of Balls Bluff. So what's going to ultimately happen is they want to find out what's going on. So Mac is going to talk to Stone, and he's going to basically say, we need to find out, because he's hearing rumors that maybe the Rebs are pulling back out of Leesburg. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't know. He just doesn't know. No. So he's going to find out. So he wants to go find out and see what the story is. Mac at this time is already getting pressure from the administration to act already. He's already catching shit from the people over there saying, you got to do something. Now, again, this is late October, almost this time of year. So it's getting cold. And so it's kind of an unusual time to think about maybe starting some sort of campaign. But again, Washington's nervous. These guys are a little too close, and they just are. So he basically wants to find out what the scoop is. So he's going to send a guy named George McCall over there. He's from Philly, so he's probably going to screw this up because it's Philly. Anyway.
That's where Meade's from, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, he didn't make it. He's dead now, so...
Actually, Meade's technically born in Spain.
Cadres, right?
Cadiz, yes.
Cadiz? Cadiz?
Cadiz. C-A-D-I-Z.
Okay.
Didn't pronounce properly.
Say Massachusetts. Go ahead.
Massachusetts.
Nope, almost. Okay. Anyway, so he's going to basically find out. So McCauley's, he's a Philly guy, and he's going to go up to a place called Drainesville, Virginia, which sounds horrible, by the way, Drainesville, Virginia.
Yeah.
It's about 15 miles away from Leesburg. He wants to see if basically they're still there. He's going to do the demonstration thing. So he's going to basically hope that Evans is gone. What happens is by McCall moving forward, and here's a big confusion. What happens? McCall's going to move forward, and what happens is Evans is going to know this. He's going to find this out. So what he's going to ultimately do is he's going to move his guys out to basically face them.
Yeah.
So they're going to move away from Leesburg. They're going to head south down towards Drainesville. And that's what's going to happen. So it looks like he's leaving Leesville. When what he's doing is he's setting up a defense. He's just moving his line forward. The plan was McCall was going to basically be there for a day or two. He was going to leave and he was going to head back. What's going on now is because Evans moves forward to kind of back away from Leesburg a little bit, there's a signal station that's not far from where the CIA building is. It's called Sugarloaf Mountain, okay? And this is the day before the battle, so it's October 20th, 1861. The wigwag guys, they're up there, and they notice that Evans is no longer near Leesburg. So now they're like, well, shit, we don't know what's going on now. We got to find out what the scoop is. So Max says, Jesus, maybe Evans is left. Maybe he's going into winter quarters, maybe he's gone west and he's just leaving it. And we can maybe do something on getting a hold of Leesburg heading into the wintertime. But he doesn't know because he's nervous. So he tells Stone, why don't you go check it out and go see what the deal is? And so, the phrase is make a demonstration. Mm-hmm. Demonstration basically means you make a lot of noise. Yeah. You basically fire a bunch of artillery. A demonstration is not an attack, but it can turn into one. Yeah, if it makes any sense, right?
Very, very similar to what Wilder does at Chickamauga before the Battle of Chickamauga to distract Braxton Bragg.
Similar to what Stevens does at Gettysburg too, on East Cemetery Hill. Very similar. So they're going to make a bunch of noise and they're going to see if they can see what the scoop is. Mm-hmm. And they do, and basically nothing really happens. They're like, well, they're out of there. So we got to do something about this. So Stone is going to basically move to a place called Edwards Ferry, which is just a little bit north of Balls Bluff. He's going to basically continue to bomb the shore. He sends the 1st Minnesota across the river to see what's up, just check them out a little bit, just to see if there's anything. But they don't see any rebel activity. There's nothing going on. Now we enter another Massachusetts guy by the name of Charles Devens.
Yep.
Okay, Charles Devens is in charge of the 15th Massachusetts. He's a Harvard guy, so I guess he couldn't get into Boston College either. He lives in a town called Charlestown, which is just north of Boston. If you've ever seen a movie called The Town, it's about Charlestown, which makes it look horrible, like it's all gangsters.
Never seen it before.
You never saw the movie The Town with not Matt Damon, the other one, Ben Affleck?
Nope, never.
Nah, the movie sucks anyway, but it makes it look like that the whole town is bank robbers, and it's really not. It's a nice little town. Some good restaurants. One thing that's important to understand about this is the timing of this battle. This is very early. Just about everyone in Devon's group is new. They've never seen battle before. Half of them never even fired their damn guns before. So they don't know what the hell they're doing. They have no idea what they're looking for, what they're seeing. What Devens decides to do is he's going to send a portion of his 15th Massachusetts to cross the river and just to scout and see. So now they're going to go for a place called Harrison's Island, and they're going to go over to Balls Bluff.
Leading this is Captain Chase Philbrook.
Yep.
Who's going to be the one that is tasked by Stone and Devens with having to do this reconnaissance mission. This is basically where the battle becomes the clusterfuck, because this is when everything hinges on what Philbrook thinks he sees here. This is the mess up.
Philbrook is a guy. He's in charge of a company called Company H. He's a captain. Has about 20 guys, not too many guys. He's going to go over to Balls Bluff to see what's going on. The timing of the day is important here. It takes a long time to get over this river, and we're going to see this going back and forth, which with these guys struggling to get across the river. Okay. So what happens is they finally get over. It's only 20 guys. Where that point of the Potomac is, it's deep and it's a pain in the ass to get across. But it's dark by the time it gets over there, or it's dusk, or it's just dark. It's probably like it is right now. It's dark in noontime here now. But it's always basically dark. They get across the river. They don't know what the hell they're looking for. They get across the bluff and they end up in this field. And it's this dark field. Just picture this big field in the middle of the night. Actually, it wasn't the middle of the night. It was probably 6, 7 o'clock. It was late. Okay, it was scary. It was dark. It's dark. These soldiers are brand new. They don't know what they're looking at. Philbrook looks out across the field. Now, this is a guy. Philbrook is excited. He's new. But he's inexperienced. I think he really, really wants to see something and report it back. Mm-hmm. I think he's whatever the hell he's seeing. Does. So he looks out across the field and he sees about 30 or 50 tents that he thinks are abandoned tents. So he thinks he stumbled upon an old camp, an old Confederate camp. So now he's excited as he's more excited than you finding an extra beer in the back of the fridge, you know, that you didn't think you had. So he's all pumped up, and he's oh my God, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna tell these guys. So he ends up going back to report to Devens. Devens goes, oh shit, okay, sounds good. I'm gonna go tell General Stone. We're gonna tell him that we found an unguarded camp across the river, and we can go fuck it up. We can go cause problems. As they say from there, Mary, it kind of goes off the rails.
Yeah. So Philbrook has obviously told Stone what he's seen. So Stone sends Devens and 300 men on a raid on October the 21st. What happens is that Devens realizes once they get to where they're going that they are outnumbered severely and they need troops. So he sends a message back to Stone and says, you need to get me troops. But the problem is they have to get the troops down the river and they only have 3 boats. And meanwhile, there's a point during this battle where Stone sends McClellan a message because McClellan is like, how are things going? And Stone's like, basically telling him, not great. We're a little short on boats, which is an understatement.
Regardless, it ain't a lot.
Something.
I mean, so Stone orders Devens, and I think it takes about 300 people.
Yeah.
To go over the river and through the woods, to grandmother's house they go, as they say. Okay, he's going to go, and now they turn from a scouting party into more of a raiding party now. Now they're going to go over there and they're going to go do some damage. They're going to take with them the 20th Massachusetts, which is the Harvard Regiment. Gettysburg people know that. They will have the 15th as well. But now it's going to set up for this next day. Now we're getting into the 21st. Okay, and so basically what's going to happen at this point, it's going to lead to that they're going to exasperate it. It's like day one at Gettysburg. The mistakes were made are going to carry into the next day. It's really going to lead to this.
Yeah, and that's when they put, like Devens has realized that he needs to wait for reinforcements to reach Leesburg. He could be outnumbered by who is Evans' men. This is when when dawn breaks, the Mississippians under Evans, they encounter Devens' advanced units, and that's when this battle begins. There's a very sharp skirmish that happens, and this is when the boat problem happens, when we're a little short on boats and they can't get the reinforcements because it creates a bottleneck at this area where they are in the Potomac. And this is where Stone sends Colonel Edward Baker, who is a U.S. Senator, to take command of the field and assess the situation. And he immediately begins gathering these troops to ferry down the river, but the support doesn't arrive until 4 hours later, which by that point it's going to be too late. So a little bit about Evans is he was born in England, came over to the U.S. when he was 4 years old. He is a U.S. Senator. He settles in Illinois, and he becomes...
You mean Baker, you mean, right?
Oh, sorry. Who did I say?
You said Evans.
Oh, fuck. I'm sorry. Fuck. Okay. I'll take that out.
No, I'm taking that. Okay.
I won't take it out. I'm sorry. Okay. I got going a little bit on a roll there.
Evans on the brain did.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, well, that's who I've been reading up a lot of. And I listened to a lecture about it today too, and it mentioned Evans a lot. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Baker is born in England, comes over to the United States when he is 4 years old. And he actually eventually settles in Illinois, and there he will become friends with Abraham Lincoln. He is a senator. And
the Abraham Lincoln?
The Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Abraham Lincoln and Mary named their son Eddie after Edward Baker.
That's true.
And Eddie unfortunately passes away when he's very, very young, before Lincoln is even elected president.
He was the second kid, right?
Yes.
After Robert, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Baker owes his position to Abraham Lincoln in the army. That's how he gets it. So he is a politically appointed guy in the army. That's how he got it. So that's another thing to keep in mind with this battle too, is he's like everybody else in this field. Baker's not very experienced, and he really obviously does not have the same army training as those that went to West Point, but he's sent to take command of the field, and things do not go well at all.
Go back to, the Lincoln thing is, this is a guy who you mentioned is a senator. He actually rode with Lincoln together in his first inaugural. Do you know that?
He did. Yep. He did.
I mean, so this is a guy that should join at the hip. I think
very close.
Those kids looked at him as like he was like an uncle.
After Baker, well, this is everybody. I mean, it's truth. Like, it's not giving away the ending. Baker will get killed, and actually Lincoln's son Willie will write a poem about his death. Mm-hmm.
He did. You want to recite that poem right now?
I know the end of it. I know the end of it is looking at the sky of blue.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that part of it too. That's something everybody knows that line. No one knows the rest of it. That might be the whole.
It's actually a really nice. It's actually a really sad poem. Like, I mean,
yeah.
Really,
well, but it just shows the impact of what this guy was. And so when Lincoln will find out the day afterwards that he isn't going to make it, it's going to have an incredible effect on that whole story or something. But going back a little bit to the battle before, the morning of the 22nd is important because it goes back to the whole point again where they still don't think there's going to be a battle. I mean, they get there right around dawn. Devins gets there and he finally sees that these camp is trees. It's just trees. It's a tree line. In the dark, it maybe looked like tents, but it wasn't tents. It was trees. It reminds me of old Extra Billy over there, July 1st, 1863, too, But he decides, and this is the thing about what's interesting about Devins and Baker and all these guys, is for whatever reason, McClellan gave them carte blanche to do what they wanted. They could do what the hell. They didn't say, if they're not there, you should leave. They gave them all the power to make those decisions themselves. Go up there and figure it out.
McClellan's going to use that to his advantage.
He is.
When this battle is over and done with, he's going to use that to his advantage.
Certainly Devins probably should have saw there was nobody there and got the hell out of Dodge, went back over again and just reported back, there's nobody here. But he doesn't. He ends up setting up a defensive line on Balls Bluff, and he reports back to Stone saying there's no camp, but he says, but I'm staying. We're going to hold a defensive position here on Balls Bluff. He decides he's going to have, just like you would, you're going to go scout and see what the hell's up. So he sends out the 15th Massachusetts to probe the area. It's a big field with trees surrounding it. This picture of a field with trees around it. There you go. Okay. They end up running into pickets from the 17th Mississippi, right around 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, right around there, early morning. What happens is there's a captain named Duff with the 17th Mississippi, and he is going to basically report back to Evans that there's feds on this side of the river. And that's really what kind of begins the mess for the Union, because what happens now is those soldiers who are down to Drainsville are going to start coming back now. Yeah. So it's going to be a wave after wave, and it's going to be a slow building, mounting Confederate attack that's coming. It's not all at one time. This is the one time the piecemeal thing actually works to their advantage, because it's a different wave coming and coming and coming that's going to come. Ultimately, what's going to happen is Evans is going to move troops back to that battlefield again, and it's going to start to put a lot of pressure on the 15th Mass. Now, again, the 15th Mass isn't all there yet. This is still just a portion. This is still a couple hundred guys. I mean, this isn't a lot of people. Early in the morning, he sends a message saying to Stone, Stone's message to Devins, that there's nobody here. So by the time the message reaches Devins, the battle's already started. Yeah. Except Devins gets the message and says, there's nothing. Now, he couldn't hear it. Maybe who the hell knows why he couldn't hear anything. But there's that gap in time. But to his credit, he does decide to send the remainder of the 15th Mass and the 20th Mass over the river to Balls Bluff. And again, it goes back to that whole mess we were talking before about how long it takes to cross that river.
Yeah, it's 4 hours because there's a bottleneck created because they only have 3 boats. You can only have 2 of them can hold very few men in terms of getting ferrying an army across. The other one, again, it's a little bit bigger, but still it can't get very many men across, and it creates this bottleneck. But this delay that allows the Confederate commanders time to organize their forces and just keep bringing in fresh troops and just keep throwing them at the Union Army. By mid-afternoon, Evans is going to lead a counterattack against the Union Army. Whatever resistance the Federals were offering, this is where Baker gets mortally wounded and it falls. Like he's done, and his men are like, fuck this. Evacuate the dance floor.
Right. Well, Baker, he ends up getting there late. I mean, he finally gets across, and Stone sends Baker over. When Stone sends Baker, he's still under the impression that there's really no fight. And again, he gets Baker, and this is where Baker's going to get in trouble later. But he gets killed. Not to spoil the ending to your point, but he gives Baker full discretion again. He says, "Go over there and do whatever the hell. Just do what you got to do." Baker basically is trying to get guys across the river. To your point, they got 3 or 4 boats at most. Yeah, it takes them 4 hours to get all those guys over the bridge. Now you're talking 11 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, and guess what happens when they get over there? Now they see there's a friggin' battle going on. Baker wasn't. I mean, again, he doesn't have a lot of experience. This is not a West Point guy. He spends most of this battle basically looking for boats. He's walking up and down the shore looking for a freaking rowboat. What the hell, So they're trying to build boats. They're trying to put these little things together, and they're trying to get the guys across. But the reality is, he's in charge of the field, and he's not there because he's looking for boats. Apparently, that's what he's doing. You have a situation where you have a limited amount of slow arriving Federals, but you also have a faster arriving Confederates by the numbers.
Yeah, that's like what I was saying before. Is the delay has created time for them to organize the troops.
So, I mean, they're thinking, well, the Rebs, and there are reports that the Rebs have 4,000 guys. I mean, they didn't, but they're thinking that's how much it was. So Baker basically is going to finally arrive around 2:00 in the afternoon. So he's going to get there at Balls Bluff. It's part of that slow arrival of the Union guys that are coming. But now he's finally on the field. So now Baker is finally on the battlefield. He sees now what's in front of him, which is he sees the 15th Mass, and he sees these other regiments showing up that are really going to be, that are in trouble. And they're in a fishbowl. They're shooting fish. I've never shot fish in a barrel before, admittedly. I'm not going to lie to you. But I imagine this is kind of close to what it was. What's happening is as the Union is showing up piecemeal, as Baker's finding the boats, and he's getting them over here. He's got Gilligan and all of them get on the boat, bring them across. He finally gets over there as the 17th and 18th Mississippi and the 8th Virginia and the cavalry is showing up. And they're showing up in mass. And so now it's basically what they're doing is they're going in the woods and they're surrounding the woods and they're just firing. And these Union guys are up against the bluff. They're basically elbow to elbow. They can't shoot all at the same time because there's too many people. These muskets are 10 feet long, Mary. These muskets.
So it's kind of like being on a subway.
It's like being on a subway with a 10-foot long gun. Have you done that?
Not recently.
No, I haven't either. That's why they don't let me on the subway anymore, in case you're curious. The situation is getting worse and worse and worse for the Union. So you got a situation, just envision it in your mind, okay? You've got a bunch of guys slowly showing up, and they're all too close. And now there's more and more and more guys coming. And I have to think Baker must have felt like, where the hell are these guys coming from? It's like all of a sudden more and more and more keep coming. There wasn't as many as they thought, but it certainly must have felt that way. Throw in the terrain. I mean, you're talking about valleys and these real stiff undulations.
Rolling hills,
undulations. And so basically, there's not a lot of room. I mean, now you've got the 15th Mass, the 20th Mass. You've got the 42nd New York, which I call the Jackie Robinson Regiment because it's 42nd New York. That's what I call them anyway. So that's what it's officially called. You have the 1st California, the California Regiment, who ended up being
Baker's leading, right?
Right. That was Baker's. And so it turns into the 71st Pennsylvania at Gettysburg, in case you're curious. If you go to the monument next to the big old tree, right at the angle, there's a monument for the California Regiment. That's who these guys are. But the terrain is very, very difficult to deal with. It's very clogged. More and more guys show up. Now the Union casualties are starting to mount because, as you can imagine, especially some of the officers. One of the officers in the 20th Mass is Oliver Wendell Holmes, right? He gets shot twice in the chest but lives. He goes on to become a Supreme Court justice. So he survives the battle, obviously. But the big loss, to your point, an hour and a half ago we mentioned Baker being killed. The stuff that goes on behind the scenes, I tell you. Edward Baker, Abraham Lincoln's friend, the only sitting U.S. senator ever killed in battle, he's going to get killed. And he's going to get killed pretty badly. There are stories that he was hit 5 times simultaneously, once in the chest, 4 times in the head, all at the same time. And so he ain't going to make it. He's going to go up the spout. Unfortunately for him, he's going to be killed instantly. At this point, the retreat is on. Baker is down. A lot of these other guys are down. And now they're going to run into the same exact problem they had now as they got over here, which is they have no way to get back.
Yeah, it was difficult enough to get over there, and now they've got to get back. And that too is just another reason that this battle is such a clusterfuck. Some of the men, if they survive the battle, they're going to end up drowning.
But these guys, the same issues they had in a battle they never should have been at in the first place, because there was no easy way to get there. Now they're pinned down and they can't get out and they're stuck. So they're trying to retreat. Now it's a full-on panic, every man for themselves. I mean, just imagine how that must have been. They're trying to makeshift boats. They're sinking. These guys are drowning, to your point. You only have a handful of boats and these guys are carrying all their stuff. And you know what the Confederates are doing? They're shooting at the boats now to make things worse for them. And these guys must be like, you kidding me? So now the boats are under fire. They're getting hit. The dudes are jumping in the water, trying to swim across. They're drowning. They're being shot. And it ends up being a complete and utter mess. Paul Revere, not the Paul Revere, but Paul Revere, the grandson, he's actually going to be captured. The commander of the 42nd New York, Cogswell, he's going to get captured. This is quickly turning into an absolute foobar situation. I mean, this is a Sunday morning in Goderich situation here. Okay,
up beyond all recognition.
Yeah, big time. This is
that might be us tomorrow morning.
This is one of those. Hey, Mary, how's your morning?
Fucker.
I'm fine. Just don't talk so loud. That's that's how it's going to be. So it's basically a complete disaster. And finally, Stone is learning of this. He's like, he's finding, he finds out a little bit later on while this is still going on, two pieces of information. One, they're getting their asses kicked. And two, Baker is dead. He gets those two pieces of information pretty quickly. It ends up being a real mess because there's stories about how these soldiers are finding Union bodies as far south as Mount Vernon.
Yeah, there was a body that washed ashore at Mount Vernon, and like in the morning, like citizens of Washington wake up and there would be bodies along the
By Georgetown University. There was one guy. He must have been pretty rotted out because they only recognize him by his distinct shoes he wore.
Yep, that was. And I think his shoes and his teeth were how they identified him. Like it was really horrific. Devens was one of the ones that ended up in the water too.
Yeah, a lot of the guys did. You know who was pretty pissed off about this battle, Mary? Everybody in the North was pretty pissed off.
Yeah,
this is one that really, because you got to think again. It goes back to the timing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to the timing where you had Bull Run, absolute pantsing. Okay, you also had Wilson's Creek, smaller battle, pantsing. Now it's Balls Bluff. Mm-hmm. It's a balls pantsing on this one.
Which it never should have happened. And I had found a really good quote I read a essay about it by a guy named James A. Morgan, and he described the battle as a simple accident that resulted from a faulty report provided by an inexperienced officer who led a reconnaissance patrol and thought he saw something that was not there. Like that is what that just goes back to what we said earlier in the episode about like the recon mission and where he saw the trees and thought they were tents. That's what sets the ball rolling on this. Had he seen the trees, it never, he'd been like, oh, those are trees. This never would have happened. And this battle has, to me, like coming away studying it, it's got such far-reaching effects, more so politically, but just how it affects like future generals of the Army of the Potomac, especially. It's going to affect them.
But I mean, you think about the human cost. We talked about some of these guys who have cost. Now, Baker, this whole story with Baker is unbelievable because you mentioned before about how close he was with Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
So Lincoln finds out the next day because the telegram thing. So ironically, McClellan is meeting with Lincoln at the White House this very moment. McClellan gets the note. He gets handed to him. McClellan reads it, folds it, probably goes, puts the note away. Do you like me? Yes, no, circle one. It's probably one of those notes. and so, but he doesn't tell Lincoln. He just says, no, that's nothing laundry. That's my laundry. That's no big deal. Yeah. And
sticks fine.
Everything's good. Everything's good. And so Lincoln ultimately finds out later on himself. He goes to the War Department. He gets the telegraph, finds out. And he's devastated. He's crying. This is a story that he almost couldn't walk. He was so upset. And you feel bad for that. I mean, this is a guy who is losing family. He lost his second son at this point. Willie, who would die later, was a huge. You mentioned the poem. Was a huge fan of him. It was basically like Uncle Eddie. But again, he was put in a situation he probably never should have been, ever. He benefited by who he was. Unfortunately, it did cost him. Baker's death in the North became a battle cry in the North, is what it did. It really
it was very political.
Well, it spread, ended up a real big deal with everything with that. The political impact, to your point, we're going to talk about that for a few minutes. Some of the things that created the human impact of this battle right off the bat. If you want to take a look at some of the casualty numbers, I'm sure you have them there with you. You can dazzle us with your McClellan math.
I didn't write. Oh, wait. I've got them.
I've got them in case you need them, Mary. I've got your back.
So total forces engaged are 3,429. It's about
1,700 each, exactly.
Yeah, 1,700 each. Estimated casualties are 1,157. 1,002 of these are Union, and 155 are Confederate. That is, what is that? Is that a 90?
I think it's like 80%. Right around there.
Close. It wasn't as bad as the other one. But of these, 223 are killed, 226 are wounded, and 553 are missing and captured. And a lot of those are from the drownings that happen afterwards.
Right. And a lot of these guys, and we mentioned some of the guys who got captured. Revere was captured. Cogswell was captured. Yeah. It takes a lot of that. But basically, it ends up as usual. I mean, you have over 200 dead soldiers right off the bat. You're dead, including Baker, the senator. It turns to the old classic Northern Army he said she said thing. It turns into the blame game now. Stone obviously was scapegoated. He was blamed for it. A lot of people felt that there was some sort of weird conspiracy thing going on, like how could they lose First Manassas and how could they lose Wilson's Creek, and now it's Balls. Something must be wrong. Right after the battle, like we mentioned before, there's a lot of finger pointing going on, and you know who gets blamed? Unfortunately,
Stone.
But Stone eventually, but who gets blamed at the beginning was Baker, right?
Yeah.
So Stone and Mack, they blame Baker. And truth be told, they're not wrong. I mean, some of the quotes, Stone had said, Colonel Baker chose to begin the battle. That's what Stone said. And then McClellan said, the disaster was caused by errors committed by Commander Baker. So they're both right off the bat, they're saying, shit, this is going to get bad. Eventually, it ended up Congress blaming Stone. Yeah. Which we'll tell about that whole fiasco, what happened to Stone.
Oh, yeah. The main one leading the charge behind that was Charles Sumner. Yeah. Who blamed Stone. Now, Sumner is an abolitionist and Stone is not. And they're looking for a scapegoat in this battle. Mm-hmm. So on February the 8th, 1862, George Sykes, who is going to later be at the Battle of Gettysburg, arrives at the headquarters of Charles Stone. And he's like, you're under arrest. And Stone is, what the fuck? What did I do?
You know what Sykes says? He says, I don't know either.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know. I'm just here.
He goes, they told me to take you away. Yeah. So he gets arrested. He says, why am I getting arrested? Sykes goes, I don't know. Just get in the back of the car. But it gets even more hilarious because he ends up going to Fort Lafayette, New York Harbor, which is a real shithole. It always has been, right?
When Stone found out, he said, that's where they send secessionists. Yeah. I have been as true a soldier to the government as any in service. And this is the thing where it's like, I watched a really good lecture about this given at Gettysburg. Oh God, what was the guy's name? But he said the one thing about this is like, what did loyalty mean? Mm-hmm. And that was such a good question in that lecture. What did
loyalty means? So Stone, he gets arrested, okay? He writes a letter saying this is a joke. This is a misunderstanding. He gets no response. So he ends up having to take the train from Washington to New York City. And he gets to the train station. They said, oh, by the way, you're going to pay for your own train ticket to jail. And he's like, fuck this. So he ends up having to pay his own way to go to prison. He's in there for a little while. He's released in 1964, basically released from the army anyway. He gets out of jail. He leaves the army. He's done. That's the end of him. And it just ends up basically to the creation of that Joint Committee on the Conduct of War, which I know you're all excited to talk about.
This is basically besides the casualties, this is one of the biggest things, one of the biggest ramifications that the Battle of Balls Bluff has. And we've all heard the name, the Joint Committee on the Conduct of War before. It especially comes up after the Battle of Gettysburg with Sickles and Meade being involved in that. I read on one account that it says Gettysburg is the most colorful part of the Joint Committee of the Conduct of War. This is why one of the reasons we felt that Balls Bluff was an important battle to talk about, because it has such big ramifications down the road. It leads to the creation of this committee. So this committee is created, it's dominated by radical Republicans. So right there, it's very political. Henry Wilson, who I think he was on the committee, he summed it up this way. It's to teach men in civil and military authority that the people expect they will not make mistakes, and we shall not be easy with their errors. So basically they're saying to the generals, if you fuck up, we are going to fuck you over. But the thing is this thing is very politically driven. It's very much radical Republicans. And you look at who Charles Stone is, he's a Democrat. So I'm not saying either is right. I'm just saying you have to look at this from a political standpoint.
Right, exactly. You do.
From the bias that exists.
He didn't carry the water. The radical Republicans, the hard charging, go. They wanted no part of a guy named Charles Stone because he was from Massachusetts. He was basically not an abolitionist. He didn't, like you mentioned at the beginning, he wasn't part of the Gould Shaw, that type of group. Yeah. He wasn't part of them. So he was somebody who was an outcast, and he's an easy target. I mean, they thought Lincoln wasn't aggressive enough, right? If you think about it, they wanted these guys, to be aggressive. You need to basically, just go end this. And you know what? They were probably right, though, because at the time they were still fighting that battle. I mean, this whole war with one arm behind their back. They really were. It ends up being a lot more aggressive. But I think this is probably the beginning. I know this, we talked before we started about how long this committee lasted for. It ended when the war ended, but there was ramifications and similar groups that came down the road in later wars.
Sherman, Uncle Blingy Sherman is one of the last ones to testify at it.
Was he a mineralogist too?
Actually, he discovered the gold rush, so yes, he was.
He was. That's hence the beginning, the genesis the Uncle Blingy name, because he could tell the golds. But for the most part, it really, I think, set the stage where these generals are walking on eggshells for the rest of the war.
Absolutely, it did. Like you can't, like, they were probably all thinking of Stone, right? Like that's what this one licensed battlefield or park ranger, should really find out his name, because he did the.
You're talking about Chris Evans at Gettysburg, right?
Yeah.
The Massachusetts man. There might be an opportunity.
Chris Evans, this lecture he gave, like, he made a remark that they all had Stone in the back of their minds because of what could happen. Like if you had somebody politically that had something against you and you were a general and you did something that might be bad, but not quite enough to get you before the Joint Committee, you might be brought before the Joint Committee because they might dig up other shit on you or whatever. The first one that goes through this is it's obviously Stone for what happened at Balls Bluff. So he testifies, but then what he doesn't know is there's these other witnesses that are coming in to testify, some of whom had never fought at Balls Bluff, and Stone had charges against them for whatever reason, so they had vendettas against him. And they came in and they said things like he was talking to the rebels across the river. Apparently there was one account that Evans, Shanks Evans, am I getting that name right? Because I mixed it up earlier. Evans.
Yeah, you're having a tough night with the names.
I am. Evans had called Stone a gentleman. And apparently that was quite not good. That they took that like, well, if the rebels calling him a gentleman, then he must not be of good character, kind of thing. Stone is going to be held at Lafayette Prison for, I think it's about 189 days. He gets released August 16th, 1862. Never ever found out why he was brought up on charges other than he has to go testify for Balls Bluff. But in that time, he writes 3 people. He writes Lincoln, he writes Stanton, and he writes McClellan. And he wants answers. None of them ever write him back. And I was shocked to learn that about Lincoln, because that seems like Lincoln as a lawyer, this guy's looking for justice and Lincoln's like silent on it. So I was like, wow, that's quite interesting. But this is something to take away from this battle, just how much the politics is playing into the military situation, and how you have someone like Stone, who does actually have he had a promising career. It's ruined because of this. Now he does go on to do some pretty cool things after the war. So he ends up going down to New Orleans for a while. Then he's with Banks, another Massachusetts. There, I butchered it again.
How was he from?
Waltham.
Nathaniel Banks? Oh my God, yes, you got it.
Waltham. So in 1870, Stone actually goes to Egypt, where he's chief of staff to the Khedive of Egypt. And for 12 years, he helps to build an army in Egypt, and then he also does surveys along the Nile. He's also one of the chief engineers involved with the construction of the Statue of Liberty, and he dies in 1887, and he is buried at West Point. He does have quite a good career after, but because of what happens to him in the Civil War, it could have, like, who knows if Balls Bluff hadn't happened, like where he might have gone in the Civil War, right? Like, it just shows these ramifications that he's been made into a scapegoat.
Well, that's exactly the whole thing. And that's the whole thing, is the scapegoats. And that this is something that comes out over and over and over and over and over again throughout this war. It's bad enough you lose a war. I mean, understand that, this is where McClellan gets bashed a lot by not being aggressive and all that. But you think about this whole battle, which ended up being a complete disaster. This whole battle started because they went into battle with troops who literally had not fired a gun before. They would think they saw trees, that there were tents. The captain of Company H, Philbrook, he was new. This was his first thing, and they send him to make that decision. I mean, so there's a lot of mistakes that were made. Instead of just simply realizing they were mistakes and learn from them, they had to be aggressive. McClellan wanted to train these guys. There's a reason why he wanted to train them, and this is exactly why. At the end of the day, you have a battle that probably a lot of people probably haven't heard of, unless you really study it. But it really set the stage for a lot of the stuff that came later on, with generals being blamed for almost everything. Basically, Washington making the decisions for these people. And then you had this Joint Committee of Conduct of War, which kind of hung over the whole thing, which is kind of like the oracle, the man in the balcony who was just basically dictating down the stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
If you're going to force these guys to go and fight, and especially going into a different, I don't want to say different country, but they weren't going into Virginia. I guess theoretically they were, I suppose. But you're doing that with very little troop experience, but you're expecting all these generals who have very little experience themselves. A lot of them were, Baker himself was not a West Point guy. He was even an American guy. He, come over from England, and he didn't have a lot of experience with it. But he's the one, and I think it goes back to a lot of these guys, with Baker to Devins to Stone. They seem to have unlimited discretion, and that went away as the war went on.
Yeah,
they didn't have that, and I think that was a big mistake too. Is that these guys didn't know what they were doing. I mean, how do you honestly send regiment after regiment, full regiments across the river without knowing the strength of the enemy? And McClellan, I mean, this is the time he thought there was 4,000 guys, was only about 1,700. If you think there's that many guys and McClellan didn't know all the details, how do you expect to fight and not expect to you have to retreat? How to get back?
It took you this long to ferry the men over, which was about 4 hours by the time Baker got over there.
Yep.
It's going to be a clusterfuck getting back. From the moment where they saw the trees that they thought were tents, it's the battle that never ever should have happened, unfortunately.
I mean, how do you expect, in totally honestly, how do you expect to fight a battle with no real retreat plan, with troops which have no experience whatsoever, with generals who have no experience whatsoever, and then wonder when it goes wrong?
Yeah. And I mean, McClellan is to blame in this too, because he's basically sitting back. And then when it comes out, like, he writes a letter to his wife and says, like, I am not to blame for any of this because I didn't know what was fucking going on. How could he not? Because Stone sends in that message where he's like, we're a little short on boats.
Captain Crunch would know this was a mistake going in. And he's not even a real guy. He's a cartoon character on a cereal box. And even he knew this wasn't going to work compared to some of these guys who were really these generals. So I think at the end of the day, it turned into a learning experience. It proved McClellan right that he had to train these guys.
Yep.
They weren't ready for prime time just yet. What it ultimately did is it helped build a military political infrastructure that kept the guidelines that was going to be based on scapegoating the rest of the war. And that was in a nutshell. And that's all because of Balls Bluff.
Yep. Yeah. And it was just so, like, those generals, like, they're thinking every time they have to make a decision, shit, if this goes wrong, or if somebody's got a vendetta against me, I could get called before the Joint Committee and I might go the way of Charles Stone and get thrown in jail for no reason for 189 days in Lafayette prison, where they keep the secessionists. You understand why, like, they had a fear of this, and what the ramifications of this battle are. They're very far reaching. They'll go right to the end of the Civil War. I don't think that the theater, or I don't think in the Western theater, the generals had as much concern with it, because I think it was every single commander of the AOP got brought before this committee.
It's a group that you obviously don't want to get called in front of, but I mean, there are so many things that you can't control through it, that if you did get called in front of it, you were going to get blamed. But in Stone's case, he gets shipped off to the island of misfit toys, doesn't even get told, and he ends up being there for a while, and then he ultimately gets kicked out of the army and just walks away. And Massachusetts guy, you don't do that to Mass guys. That seriously.
I know, because they're the best, right?
They are the best. Greenfield, though, that's basically Vermont. But Devon's, though.
One thing to add, that Devon's guy, he's pretty badass, isn't he?
I don't know. A good guy. He's a Harvard guy, I think. He couldn't get into BC, but it's okay. A lot of people can't.
So the Joint Committee is actually going to meet 272 times during the war, from its formation in late 1861, early 1862, till when it disbands. Basically, May 22nd, 1865 is when General Sherman is going to give the final testimony there. So you think 272 times that they meet.
Ends up being a mess. And I think, this is a situation where maybe that's partially the reason why Lincoln maybe took a more of a firm step going forward. Because he had this group who wanted to be more aggressive.
But this could have instilled, now thinking about that, you just mentioned that the Balls Bluff could have put fear in him, like, holy shit, we got to have a closer eye on what's going on.
Oh, I think you absolutely had to. Yeah. I mean, I think you have to. And it obviously led to meddling and a lot of stuff. But I mean, it does explain a lot. I mean, we've said this a billion times, okay? We have all these years to look back on this stuff. Everything here happened in real time. It's just understanding that all war is politics. All politics is war. Someone made up that phrase. It wasn't me. But I'm going to claim it, though. I'm just going to claim it. Darren said that. That's a quote. You quote that. Put that in Shin Tzu's war book. Darren's quoted it.
No, isn't it Colonel von Schimmelfucker the third quote?
Oh, yeah, it was the third. He was an interesting guy. Nice guy, monocle guy, but a good guy. Everything was going on as politics. I mean, war is an extension of politics. It's a different level of politics. But I think it all boils down to the fact that these guys not only needed to win, but they needed to be getting credit for the win. And that was a part of it too.
Yeah.
And when things went bad, you had to have someone to blame.
Yeah.
You know, Stone and McClellan originally blaming Baker because Baker's dead. And you know what? If Baker didn't get killed, he probably would have got court-martialed and maybe would have got sent over to Lafayette too, even though he was a senator.
Yeah.
Because he really, I mean, you really want to play the blame game? I mean, don't you kind of have to blame Baker a little? Kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was a lot of them to blame, but some of it does fall on Baker's shoulders too. But I wonder, given just how the senators rallied around him, I don't know that he would have been thrown in prison. I think that Stone might have taken the fall again too. You know, just looking at how they were like, no, this is wrong. Okay, let's go after that guy who's not the abolitionist. Let's go after Stone.
Probably right. He probably wouldn't have gone to jail. He probably would have lost his command though. They probably would have.
He probably would have lost his command and he would have went back to being a senator. But you know, who knows? Like, you know, you look at some other politically appointed generals or politicians that were generals, like, well, another politically appointed one, McClernand. I mean, he eventually lost his command. He stays in a lot longer than he should have.
There was some good debate on McClernand on Twitter today, Mary.
Yeah.
I didn't read it because it was 800 messages, but
yeah, and I was like on a kind of Twitter silence thing today too because of the election. So.
Oh, and you got scolded today.
I know I did. Well. Got scolded
and I'm the
followed.
one, and I'm the one who took the friendly fire for you, by the way.
Yeah, I know you did. I thanked you for it.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm sure it's very heartfelt. Thank you on that one.
I'll buy you a beer in Gettysburg.
Oh wow, okay. One for me, two for me, one for you. I know that works, but I think. God, but I do think at the end of the day, though, it does bring up a good point. We mentioned at the beginning how this Civil War was fought in 10,000 battles.
Yeah.
And this one may not be the most important one as far as the mainstream goes, but it's one that kind of ran through the fiber of all the battles going forward. Because I think the legacy of Balls Bluff stayed with all the generals going forward, especially on the Union side, obviously.
Yeah.
Throughout the rest of the battle until ultimately at the end of the day, the Union won, but they went through generals the way they went through Sox. And that's just the way it was because they couldn't, every time there was a loss, someone had to be blamed. And that's how it was.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, Balls Bluff.
I think we had a really good discussion about that tonight. I'm glad we discussed it. It's one of the lesser known battles. So it's good to, especially like 1861, like admittedly, I'm not as well versed in 1861 as I am in say 63, 64 and the first part of 65.
Well, it's basically a bunch of wars in one. I mean, 1861, again, you had soldiers who literally were showing up with guns. They didn't know how to load, never saw battle. They were seeing, think about it, they were seeing dead soldiers for the first time. They were seeing injuries for the first time.
Yeah.
You got to imagine, how fast they must have ran when everything went bad. And you can't blame them. These are volunteers. These aren't dudes from, trained military guys. These are farmers and clerks and everything else. Bar owners, clowns, balloon pilots.
Bang barn owners.
Maybe a couple of mimes thrown in there for fun, but there weren't a lot of military guys, and so it really comes down to it. So I think it's a good story. I think I'm glad we did this one. I think it's fun to get back on the battles again.
Yeah.
So coming attractions, we obviously have our live on Saturday,
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock a.m. Be there, be square. And then next week, we are going to
do part 1 of March to the Sea.
Oh, and one thing we're going to mention too is next Monday, we are going to be guests on John Heckman's Tattooed Historian thing, which we are very excited about. Our friend
we
John.
are very excited. If you haven't followed, you can find John on Facebook. He's Tattooed Historian. He's on Twitter is at Inked Historian. He's a really good follow. He knows his shit about history. He's quite knowledgeable in a lot of different areas of history. So
John is the best. He is a good guy,
and
we're going to be very excited to be on that. We're going to be on there. Hopefully, Mary's in a good mood. I guess we'll never know. We'll find out. We don't know what the hell she's going to bring that night, but I'm looking forward to that. And then next week we are going to be doing
March to the Sea.
March to the Sea, which means Uncle Blingy. Really, it was going to be. I know he was part of the Atlanta one, but this is going to be his real introduction to the Civil War Breakfast Club. I think this is going to be the one.
Yep, and we're only going to do part of the March to the Sea, and then we're going to leave you all hanging until close to Christmas.
Yeah. Spoiler though, he does get there eventually. But
just like everybody in Washington didn't know where he was for a while. That's where we're going to leave you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the battles for Chattanooga coming up as well.
And we're going to be doing a little Battle of Franklin, correct?
Yep. Some point we will be for sure. Probably I think we'll probably have to do that one in December. And yeah, we got lots of fun stuff coming up. We're going to do also Battle of Fredericksburg in December as well.
And we're going to have a lot of different fun. So I think this was a good one. I think you said balls many times. You didn't giggle once. That's a good thing. I'm going to give you credit for that. I thought there'd be trouble with this one. You did okay. I think overall this was a good one. So I think we can pretty much pull the plug on Balls Bluff. I almost said Balls Creek, but that's another story.
Balls Falls is the beer I'm drinking.
Balls Falls.
Yeah.
But again, everybody, thanks for listening for this. This will drop obviously Saturday. So hope you're enjoying your early part of the weekend. Hope you survive the rest of the week. I think we've done enough damage for one night, Mary. I think we can get ready to shut this down and we can go live our lives as productive as we possibly can.
I think so too.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will talk to you all soon. Again, thanks for listening. We will see you at the live on Saturday. We'll mention the thing on Monday, but definitely check out Tattooed Historian Monday, as you will see our smiling, goofy faces live on your TV screen /iPad/phone. So anyway, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you all next time.
See you guys.
Peace out.
Bye.